Hey, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It is Christian Mosley, your host of Berean Talk, just coming at you real quick. I just want to give you a quick PSA before the episode gets started and let you know number one, I do apologize for the lateness of the release for this episode due to some technical difficulties I was having with my equipment as well as some other major life changes. Um, I was not able to get this out in time before the election was over. However, because of how important this conversation was that I had with Mr. Johnny Dawkins, who's the City Council representative for District 5, as well as the current Mayor Pro Tem for Fayetteville, North Carolina. Just wanted to let you guys know that with this conversation, I definitely wanted you all, as the audience, to be able to get an opportunity to have some insight into what we discussed and maybe even formulate your own questions the next time you see myself or Mr. Dawkins, as well as wanted to let you guys know that we have, I say we, it's really me. I have some things in the works for you guys as far as what's next for Berean Talk, some new segment ideas and different things that have been spinning around in my noggin that I will be bringing to the interwebs. So stay tuned for that. I hope you guys are enjoying the beginning of your 2023. And until my next appearance out here in these internet streets, pieces and blessings. Enjoy. All power to the people! 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 No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! No justice! No peace! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the revolution!
You will not be able to stay home, brother. You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. You will not be able to lose yourself on Skag and skip out for beer during commercials because the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions. The revolution will not show you pictures.
Man, what's going on, Berean Talk family? It is your boy, Christian Mosley, host of Berean Talk, coming at you with another installment to the Berean Talk show. And of course, today we are delving into another installment to the series, Meeting the Candidates. And I have with me today a very distinguished gentleman. He is the current incumbent for Fayetteville, North Carolina City Council for District 5, none other than the illustrious Mr. Councilman Johnny Dawkins himself. How are you doing today, sir?
Fine, Mr. Mosley. That's probably the finest introduction I've ever had in my entire 63 years.
I'm glad I could give it to you. I'm glad I could be the one to give it to you. Before we get right into it, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dawkins has been an incumbent for a few years now. For those of you all that are not familiar with Fayetteville and the environment, what's been going on here. And so we are here today, as we do every time we come on this show, to have a very objective and honest conversation about politics, about our plans to be able to move this city forward, and what we plan to do even outside of that. So I'm here with Mr. Dawkins today, and I just want to jump right into it. So my first question for you, sir, is what made you want to get into politics in the first place? Was this something that you were kind of raised in and kind of groomed for, or was this something that you saw some things going on in your community and you decided this was the way to get involved?
Wow, great question. Actually, both answers. Yes, I was raised in it. My granddad, Johnny Dawkins, was in the North Carolina House in the 40s and early 50s. And then my dad got elected in 1975, and he served 25 years. So I grew up in a household with a city council member. And plus, I had uncles on the school board, a great uncle who was on the transportation board with Governor Bob Scott in 1968. And so yes, family, very involved in politics. And then I got involved after coming back from Wake Forest, meeting my wife there, getting married, and starting a business, selling computers for 20 years. I then was able to get more involved in the Chamber of Commerce and our military affairs, and then joining Fayetteville State Foundation Board and Fayetteville Tech Foundation Board, raising money for charities. And that kind of propelled me into politics after my dad passed away in '00. So yes, both raised in it and then wanted to get involved after seeing it firsthand.
Okay. All right. Excellent. And and it seems like you kind of touched on it, but even for the folks at home that might have missed it already, what would you say would be your connection to Fayetteville, and then of course specifically to District 5 in particular?
That's right. Another good question, Mr. Mosley. I grew up in the district. I grew up in a neighborhood called Haymount, and from there, a lot of folks knew the family name, and that obviously helped me when I went door to door. Folks said, "Oh yes, I knew your granddaddy," or "Oh yes, I knew your dad," and that name recognition definitely helped. I didn't have to spend as much money trying to get my name recognized. So, but you have to go door to door. You folks have to meet you. They have to see, who you are, what you stand for, how hard are you willing to work, how hard are you willing to serve.
Mm.
So that's how I got going, and that was I ran in '01 for mayor and got beat, and then I in '03 I ran for city council and won. And then Fayetteville did the what's called the Big Bang annexation in '05, and the voters sent me home. I got beat, and so I focused on raising the family, getting my kids raised, and then I got back into politics in '17 and won on city council.
All right, all right, excellent, excellent. So you mentioned a very key word in that last statement, which is serving, and we understand that for a lot of people, their understanding of being a politician is one of the other words that they use for that is a public servant, and being that you have a very long-standing reputation here in the city, and then even more so, your family having a long reputation in the city. So my question for you is, even outside of the political arena, what would you say is tangible evidence of you serving people either in the city of Fayetteville or even in your district prior to you getting elected to that seat in 2017?
Yes, sir. Well, uh, all of us, if we live long enough, face some type of tragedy in our lives. And mine was twofold. Dad got prostate cancer. He wouldn't go to the doctor for years.
Oh wow,
And
sure.
then when you start feeling cancer, it's too late. But Dad did great for 7 years, fought cancer. That was in 1993. He and Richard Petty got prostate cancer the same week in 1993. And Richard Petty went to Bowman Gray Wake Forest for his work. My dad stayed here. I begged him to get other opinions. He wouldn't do it. So in October 6th of '94, my daughter got her first brain tumor. So I
Wow.
had to pretty much focus on my 36 employees with my 3 computer stores, work my dad's medical claims at Cape Fear Valley, and work my daughter's chemotherapy claims at Duke Medical Center. So
Mm.
I jumped into the medical field in a big way. My wife and I did, and plus we're raising a son besides our daughter. So from tragedy, we lost our dad, my dad, in May 30th, '00. Jill was able to survive. She survived chemo. She survived a second brain tumor. She survived radiation, and she is a nurse today at Wake Med in Raleigh. So out of tragedy and service, it focuses you, Mr. Mosley, Christian. It focuses you about what's important in life.
Absolutely. Wow, and then of course, my condolences to you and your family on the loss of your father. I've experienced close losses myself, so I can definitely not that close, but I can definitely sympathize with that. So definitely my condolences to you and your
Yes,
family.
sir. Yes,
Um,
sir.
And then of course the incredible story of your daughter going through what she went through, and then coming out and getting her education and being able to help those that can't really help themselves. That's a lot of what the medical industry is. My wife is also in the medical, or has medical training as well, and has been in the medical
Ex-
industry. So it takes a special type of person to be able to get in there and to do what they have to do day in and day out.
yes,
Um,
sir.
so in talking about opposition, and you know, kind of laying out there for the audience, that you've definitely had your fair share of it, and we've seen, of course, not only on the personal side, but also on the political side. There's been a lot of opposition for everybody that has kind of been running in this current race. Um, you know, of course, your opponent, Mr. LaChance, you know, has in various different occasions, you know, mentioned you, or might have even made certain remarks. So how have you been dealing with some of the opposition during this particular time in in your candidacy, being that we're getting ready to wind that up here in a little bit, just in a matter of weeks, actually.
That's exactly right. My opponent served our country, and I applaud his service. He's worked mighty hard in his business. He appears to be trying to do the right things, which I applaud. And I leave it up to the people. Um, I have run, this is my seventh time. I've run
Mm.
3 times and won, and I've run 3 times and lost. So it's no fun to lose, but I will tell you, you learn a lot. And but you know, we're both working mighty hard for the people, and the people are deciding now through early voting, and then of course on July 26th, 2 weeks from tomorrow, is the actual election. Yes, sir.
Of course, absolutely. So with that being said, there was a, if I could put it this way, there was a very scathing letter that was written earlier this year by former Councilwoman Miss Tisha Waddell. And it's been, of course, the talk of really everybody in the city that has had a chance to see it for themselves. And then, of course, those that have heard, you know, whispers through the grapevine and whatnot. And so, my question for you is, what were your thoughts on that, especially being that there was some very inflammatory accusations put in there, and being that you were one of the persons that were named, as well as some of your other colleagues. So, what would be your response, I guess, to the citizens that are having some second thoughts about whether it might be integrity, or maybe any other concerns that the citizens of Fayetteville might have, especially those that are considering voting in your particular district?
Yes, sir. I've worked with Council Lady Waddell since we both got elected in 2017. She ran unopposed in 19, as did I, but she had a write-in candidate. So I wrote her a check. I wrote her a check to support her campaign. I said, you know, Tisha, we don't always agree, but doggone, I respect you tons. You work hard. You come prepared, and she did, and she dove in. I mean, she dove into every issue, and she worked mighty hard. Yes, I was called out, and obviously I was a little disappointed. However, I was involved in talks with PwC because I was known as the liaison from the city council to the PwC, and my job was to represent the city council, and in effect the city, to the Public Works Commission. So we had very tough conversations. My concern is they pay their employees more than a city employee makes, even though they are owned by the city. My concern is on the economic piece. I felt like PwC was not investing enough economically. I want to see the area around our airport with water and sewer. And so yes, I was. I'm not a favorite of PwC, nor do they like me very much. when I was a liaison, I was not invited on any of their trips, as other liaisons have been invited and are invited. So that ought to tell you something. They don't really like me much. And, so sure, Ms. Waddell is, I hated to see her resign. I wish she'd have stayed on, but she didn't. And I think her and the mayor have more beef with each other than me and Mrs. Waddell. But that's okay. Maybe she'll find her future. I know she's involved in social media and doing shows, and I've heard good things about that. So it'll be interesting to see what goes forward. The folks who wanted to lease PWC, I haven't heard from them in months and months, so not sure if that's going to come back or not. But and then the other thing is, if we were to sell PWC, I'm told it requires a vote of the citizens of Fayetteville. So I really don't see that as a probability.
Okay, okay, understood, understood. So, ladies and gentlemen, of course, this gets to segues into what I like to call one of my favorite parts of the show, which is kind of like the fire round. And in this part of the show, we like to discuss some very hard hitting, tangible plans for the city on different areas that a lot of the candidates have been talking about. They've been talking about it during the public forums. If you haven't had a chance to see them, those being put on by the Fayetteville Observer, the NAACP, or the local chapter here in Fayetteville, and others. And so today, of course, we want to ask Mr. Dawkins about some of his plans and what he plans to do if he does get elected, and how he'll bring those plans about. So my first question for you, sir, is what are your plans for crime reduction here in the city of Fayetteville? And I want to preface that by also mentioning that, of course, since the year 2020, we have seen an uptick in a lot of violent or even what they would like to call as crimes of desperation skyrocketing all over the nation. And so it is a little bit discouraging when folks try to single Fayetteville out like it is uniquely Fayetteville, when in fact it is a national trend. However, there are some things that are happening here that a lot of citizens have concerns about, all the way from the elderly down to young children that live in this community. And so, my question for you, sir, what would be your plans to help out or even help reduce the crime happening in the city of Fayetteville? And even more so, what were your thoughts on the year that kind of tipped all of this off in the first place?
Well, all great questions, Mr. Mosley. First off, I did make the motion to fully fund the Fayetteville Police Department. That was a year and a half ago, and I've supported the step pay increases along with their raises. So yes, we've got to fully fund the police. Number two, we have to continue recruiting, and number three, we got to continue training. Unfortunately, excuse me, we become a recruiting ground ourselves, meaning if a cop can do great in Fayetteville, he can do outstanding anywhere in America because they get so much training.
Hmm.
Now, the bad part of that is we see a lot of, aggravated assault, a lot of bad crime. So I've been saying we've got to do more. We've got to do more with our gangs, meaning we've got to convince gangs that that's not the best way of life. That's number one. Number two, we've got to do more to stop the flow of drugs into our city. We're a crossroads for, of course, I-95 and I-40. We're halfway between New York and Florida, so we're in a rough spot, and we have the largest military post in the world, 10 miles from our downtown. So yes, it's going to be a challenge. It will always be a challenge. We must continue to recruit and train our officers with a lot of influence into stopping aggravated assaults. Now, do I want to see increases in mental health spending? Yes. Part of our crime problem is a mental health issue. Part of our homeless problem is a mental health issue. So, there's a lot of things that we have to do to improve our quality of life in this city.
Okay, all right, excellent. And so though, so that's a great segue into my next question that I have, which is when it comes to police and citizen relations. Um, we've seen a lot of different things happen over the years, where we've had accusations of police misconduct, we've had actual police misconduct, we've also had citizen misconduct towards police in a different manners. But one of the things that I found very interesting, especially me having grown up in this city and knowing a lot of people that have been here much longer than I have, is that there seems to be, especially amongst the black, or if I could even put it this way, the ADOS, which is an acronym I use for American Descendants of Slavery. For those particular citizens here in Fayetteville, there seems to be this level of distrust with law enforcement, whether it be perceived from what's on social media and what's been pushed by mainstream media, or even personal experiences that they've experienced here in the city. I personally know people that have been either sexually harassed, verbally harassed, sexually assaulted, even by local officers here in the city of Fayetteville, or even exploited. And of course, this isn't necessarily an indictment on every officer on the force. I know some very fine gentlemen and women that wear that badge proudly and do it justice. But of course, there seems to be this trend where it seems like, as Jesus would put it, the least of these seem to be the ones that fall prey to some of this misconduct. So what would be your plans to kind of either alleviate that or address that and kind of root out the bad apples, as they say, with especially within the Fayetteville Police Department?
No, very good question. The first thing we have done is created a citizen advisory board. Now, the reason it's a citizen advisory board is only the North Carolina legislature can create a citizen review board. Now, I believe we're the only city over 100,000 in population that does not have a citizen review board. So that's got to be worked through the North Carolina legislature. But the Citizen Advisory Board at least will get folks talking. And that's the one thing our police department has done a better job than in years past is talking to the community, is being very active in the community watch meetings. So if folks are interested, they can meet, their local police. But yes, there there is still a distrust, excuse me, between our police and a lot of our citizens, especially as you call it in the ADOS community, in the African American or in the minority community, whether it's Asian or Hispanic, the Latina. There's still some distrust, and we must every day work to improve those communications. And it took us a while to get to where we are. It's going to take us a good while, unfortunately, to improve. But my commitment is we must treat our citizens always with respect, no matter where they're red, green, blue, doesn't matter what color they are. Everyone deserves respect.
Okay, absolutely, absolutely. And so my next question, and it kind of meshes with the previous two questions. When we're talking about crime, of course, we know statistically, a lot of crime, especially the ones that we're seeing a lot of here, whether it's drug trafficking, as well as, yeah, aggravated assault and things like that. Of course, these come from not only mental health situations, but also we're talking about some economic distress that has kind of hit all of us in various ways, some of us harder than others. And so, of course, when it comes to the city of Fayetteville, what would be, I guess, your plan to help economically stimulate a lot of the citizens here? Being that, when you look at studies like the study done by JP Morgan, where you have about 60+% of small businesses only make it about 2 to 5 years We just recently saw that, and I know that this isn't particularly in District 5, if I'm not mistaken. End Zone, they had a takeout eatery that they had incorporated with their business. They've now just announced on Facebook and I believe other social media sites that they are no longer going to be having the restaurant just due to the lack of having the employees as well as other stresses and factors that kind of affect that. And we saw that kind of come and go very quickly. And so, what would be, I guess, your plan to help provide a stable economic environment where not just the Amazons of the world or the Walmarts and things like that can come in and build and provide jobs. But what about the mom and pop shops that, we do need to see more of those around for like 10 and 15-year periods. So what would be your plan to kind of bring about that stability?
Yes, sir. Another good question. Well, number one, we created a grant program to help our micro businesses, those folks who, let's say, they have one, two, or three employees. We've got a grant program, especially for those folks because of this terrible pandemic that we've endured now for over 2 years. That's number one. Number two, we have the largest military post in the world, and we must do a better job of recruiting military contractors to Fayetteville. Now, recently, I guess it's about 4 weeks ago now, we approved a rezoning for a company called CACI, CACI. They train folks who fly drones. Well,
Oh,
you
wow.
know, a lot of folks don't know, but we're flying a lot of drones at Fort Bragg, or the drones are being operated from Fort Bragg and they're OCONUS, as the military likes to say. They're outside the continental United States.
Okay.
Um, and you may know that the Air Force operates drones out of Nellis Air Force Base, which sits outside of Las Vegas, Nevada. So the Army has a lot of drones here, and they're operating them around the world, and they're doing a lot of the training right here. And CACI is going to add 12 more employees with an average pay of 70 grand and up. So that's an over $800,000 in new income, which is positive. But that's just one example. I mean, we still have, so many other military contractors here that we need to make sure the environment is best for them to expand. We want them to hire local because we are putting out good students from Fayetteville State, from Fayetteville Tech, from Methodist University. We now are starting to reap benefits from these military contractors who are choosing to locate here. And yes, you are correct about Amazon and Walmart expanding and FedEx expanding. Those are your 17 to $20 an hour. And yes, Christian, you are correct. Not many people are aware, but some of these aggravated assault crimes are based on economics. These young people don't have good paying jobs. We've got to increase our good paying jobs, because if we've got more money in our back pocket, we generally spend less time committing a crime. So you hit on three or four very tough subjects that we must improve upon, and economics is the big part of it. And we've got to leverage Fort Bragg, as we're doing some just recently with CACI, but yes, there are quite a few others.
Okay, okay, absolutely. And I love the fact that you kind of touched on my next question that I was going to have, which is young folks. We're seeing increasingly that we have a very large population of young people here, especially when you're talking about the millennials. We have a millennial advisory board that kind of works with the city right now. And then, of course, we have Gen Z coming along as well, who is, looking to try to buy houses, looking to start their own families and the like. And we're seeing this trend, especially even outside of the economic stability that we do have in Fayetteville, but we're also seeing the generational gap of who's stable and who's not. And so my question for you is, how do we go about trying to make Fayetteville an environment that's going to be able to cultivate young people and be a place where they can actually afford. I'm frequently going into rooms or having conversations with some of my peers who are, in their early 30s, mid 20s, even early 20s, who are experiencing the phenomenon of not being able to afford a city that they grew up in. And it's not uncommon to see someone riding around town with a DoorDash bag in the back seat, a Lyft and a Uber sticker up front, and they still work at McDonald's or Bojangles or whatever the case may be. And then, of course, that takes out time from their family. That can also cause other mental stresses as well. So, outside of, honestly, from what we've seen, even amongst the Bureau of Labor and Statistics for Fayetteville, outside of having a degree, there doesn't seem to be a ton of economic opportunities available, especially for young people. So, what would be one of your solutions to that? Whether it be leading them to the resources or just creating the opportunities for those young people to thrive and to be able to be the leaders for tomorrow.
Wow. Well, you asked about 5 questions over that 2 minute span. Excellent points. All right, let me try to take them one at a time. All right. So now here, I'm not going to thrill a lot of people with this first part of your answer, but number one, it is education. All right. Now, as I've told my son, who is 36, and I told my daughter, who is 31, I told them this, 15 years ago. I said, your generation, if you want to make 100 grand a year, you're going to have a degree past your BA or BS.
Mm.
So my daughter got her BS at High Point University, and then she went and got her radiation technician degree, and then she borrowed some money, and we helped pay some of the money. But she borrowed money to go to Medical University of South Carolina and got her BSN, her Bachelor of Science in Nursing. So somewhat of an advanced degree. Nursing is hot. Okay, Fayetteville State has an excellent nursing program. Join that nursing program, young people. Fayetteville Tech has a CNA program. Get involved. Get that education. Yes, get your associates. Yes, get your BA or your BS. But as my son did, he got his engineering degree, BS at State, and then he went on and worked for an engineering company and got his professional engineering degree. So what I'm saying is the first part of your answer is you must get as much education as possible. Now, if you cannot afford to get an education, we've got the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marines. That is an excellent way to have somebody else pay for your education, because you can get these degrees. You can commit your 6 years to the Army or the Air Force, or the Navy or the Marines, and get those degrees. Come out with a degree. That's going to give you a leg up. Get these young people that play video games are now being hired by khaki and others to teach people how to operate drones. Their hand-eye coordination, they're telling me, is incredible. They could fly jet fighters, but they're going to make more money flying drones than flying airplanes. Now, so to answer your question, education. Number two, yes, working 2 jobs. Yes, I did that until I was 32 years old, cutting grass besides selling computers. These young folks now can work from home over the internet, selling their clothes, selling their used furniture, selling their appliances. My son just sold his appliances, and then he went and bought a newer model, but not new. So there is opportunity with this thing called the internet. So I know that's a lot to throw at you, Mr. Mosley. Great questions. But it really boils down to education, commitment, willingness to work. And you've got all of that. And so many of your friends have that attitude and desire just like you do.
Okay, excellent, excellent. I like that. At least the way that you kind of put that there are some opportunities out there. and we're kind of in an age where labor is valuable to an extent, but also now it's about kind of learning how the system works and being more resourceful now, especially being that the economy is kind of as volatile as it is. And so this is kind of going to lead to my final two questions, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. So my question for you is, of course, we've kind of delved into a myriad of topics, a myriad of things for the city. And of course, as I mentioned before, with myself, being Black or ADOS or African American, however, you want to put it, we've noticed that there are some very specific problems that our sector of the community does face. We understand that we are the second, depending on who you look at, we are the second largest ethnic group here in the city that experiences some very interesting things, if I could put it that way. And so even when you mentioned the education piece, we've seen different things put forth by the US government in different studies, especially when you're looking at the Federal Reserve, where even when we do get the education, even whether it's a high school diploma or a bachelor's or a doctorate or MBA, whatever the case may be, we don't often get those same opportunities. And I know, of course, people personally that have kind of been locked out of those as well. Even here in the city of Fayetteville, we've seen the everlasting effects of redlining that haven't necessarily been corrected, and a lot of other things happening here that specifically affect that community. And of course, the hot topic has been, the revitalization of the Murchison Road corridor and things like that. So, and of course, my last question that kind of is coupled with that is, for me personally, and this is something I talk about on the show all the time. My audience, you guys have hear me talk about this every chance that I get, is the concept of reparations for Jim Crow and slavery. Now, I do want to put this out there, of course, that reparations is not something that can be done at a local level. So I am in no way, shape, or form expecting a local municipality to put forth something that really would require federal approval and federal advocacy. However, I did want to get your opinions, number one, on what your thoughts are on that as a response to a lot of the things happening here. And if you have one, what would be your plan for the ADOS population here in the city of Fayetteville to kind of help them get collectively uplifted in order to engage in the American dream?
Wow. Well, you are correct. It is not a local decision. That's a federal decision. You're going to have a lot of pushback, I think. From some folks. I started cutting grass. When I was 9 years old with a push mower that the blade spun. um and you've probably seen pictures of them, but I work like a dog, and um I have always worked. I sold books door to door in Kansas in 1978. I've had a lot of life experiences, and so I put up insulation. So there are jobs out there if we're willing to work. The reparation piece, I would much rather see the federal government do what it's doing, which is creating opportunities for young people, whether it be this AmeriCorps. In the 60s, we called it the Peace Corps. And I think the Peace Corps is still around. I don't know. But, it won't pay you much, but it'll pay you something, and it can get you started in life. And the AmeriCorps is a jobs program doing the same thing. So whether we end up with, what some are calling, like Andrew Yang called it, basic, income of $1,000 a month the rest of your life. The one thing we don't want to do is create an environment where folks are getting paid not to be productive. Now, you and I can't make it on $1,000 a month.
Right.
We're going to be working. I worked, like I say, two jobs after college for 10 years, and in 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and still, barely, quote, made it. and I'm not sure what made it really means. I reside in a 2 bedroom, 1 bath rental house. I'm trying to sell my big house. My father-in-law passed away. My mother-in-law moved in, and she was not happy, so we bought her a little house in Garner, and so I'm paying for that besides my big house, besides my rental house. So yes, I've got 2 jobs. One is a city council member. I make 1,400 a month, and the other is a health insurance salesman, broker, consultant. So I don't know, brother. The reparations piece, I would rather we create opportunities for African Americans and get them doing good. Where Fayetteville State forgave 1.6 million in debt. That's a great start. It's I came out of college with debt. I went to law school. I failed after a year and still had debt. I had debt all the way until I was 32 years old, and that's when I quit that second job. But um, I don't know. There's going to be some things that you and I don't get to decide, but I want to be available to you always, and I appreciate these tough questions. This was not an easy interview for me.
All right, all right. Well, I definitely tried to do my best to make it as a robust conversation as possible. But I definitely can appreciate, excuse me, I can definitely appreciate your take on that. Um, and I appreciate, even you kind of looking at that. All right, sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. We had some tough technical difficulties, but as I was saying, Councilman Dawkins, I definitely can appreciate your perspective on that. I myself am proudly a part of a grassroots organization that's actually moving towards trying to make reparations a reality. Shout out to Miss Yvette Carnell and Mr. Antonio Moore, who are the founders of that movement, which is also called ADOS. It just happens to be as well. Um, but yeah, that is definitely something that I'm a strong proponent of. However, I do appreciate that you've been able to, unlike a lot of other politicians, you're able to recognize at least that there are some very specific things happening, things that cannot be ignored, and to sit stagnant about them would definitely be doing a disservice to those that are in the community, those that we call our neighbors, our friends, and the like. And so
Right.
before we get out of here, I wanted to leave you a couple of minutes to give any type of message to the audience. You can let them know where to go support you, where they can go vote, as well as even give to your campaign as well, and any other things that you'd like to leave with them.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mosley. Yes, so early voting has started, and it is at Fountainhead Lane, um, downtown at the Cumberland County Board of Elections. And it's kind of a fun time. I encourage folks to vote early, just because it is a fun time. You're going to see folks of course, I ask that our candidates be nice to you and the voters. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're a little overbearing. But as I tell my folks, just be nice and thank people for voting. So many great Americans lost their lives defending the right that we have to go vote in our leaders, and that we're not ruled by a monarchy or a dictatorship. So, and yes, my website is jldawkins.com, and that's jldawkins.com. The election is Tuesday, July 26th, and that is in 2 weeks from tomorrow. So, and yes, I'm on Facebook, and my direct line is 910-401-9452. And if I miss you, please leave a message. I'll get back to you. Twice I've been recognized as the most responsive politician out of about 25. That's the Board of Education, the Board of Commissioners, and the City Council and the other elected folks in our North Carolina delegation. So I pride myself on getting back to folks but as my dad told me, son, the Lord gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. So you really need to listen twice as much as you talk. That's hard for politicians sometimes. But thank you, Mr. Mosley, for your time.
Of course, of course. And before we get out of here, ladies and gentlemen, I do want to ask Councilman Dawkins just one last question. Is something I like to ask a lot of the candidates, which is, with all of that being said, with all of the getting ready for the election and everything else, my final question for you is, sir, what happens if you lose?
Wow, that means I'll get to spend a lot more time with my 2 grandsons in Raleigh. And I very much enjoy traveling. I've been to every state but Alaska. I'd love to plan a trip if my wife will let me to go to Alaska. I've seen it on television. It looks beautiful. But yes, I'll work hard, and I'll continue to do that in my health insurance business. I enjoy it very much, being on the cancer board at Duke with Coach K and some other folks that you know.
All right.
Yeah, so I'm able to help folks to get seen as quickly as possible if they want to choose Duke as a second opinion. Excuse me. Yes, sir.
All right, excellent. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that has been another episode of Berean Talk and another installment to the Meet the Candidate series. We have had Councilman Johnny Dawkins here in Areopagus to chop it up with your boy, to talk about what's going on in Fayetteville and what the plans are to do some things about it. And of course, as always, as the next time you all see me out here in these internet streets or even in the actual streets, pieces and blessings. I love you guys. We're out of here.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you.
The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be right back after a message about a white tornado, white lightning, or white people. You will not have to worry about a dove in your bedroom, the tiger in your tank, or the giant in your toilet bowl. The revolution will not go better with Coke. The revolution will not fight germs that may cause bad breath. The revolution will put you in the driver's seat. The revolution will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised. The revolution will be no rerun, brothers. The revolution will be live.